If you've ever been to Bali or even just seen a movie about it, you've heard this sound. It's hypnotic, right? That shimmering metallic sound that just seems to hang in the air. That's gamelan. But here's the thing, it is so much more than just background music. It's the sound of a culture's soul, and it tells this incredible story of power, of loss, and of resilience.
So that brings us to a pretty big question. Can music, a bunch of instruments and melodies, can it actually fight back? Can it stand up against colonialism, commercialism, even the simple fact of being forgotten? Well, in the case of Balinese gamelan, the answer is a huge, resounding yes. But to understand how Gamelan learned to fight, we first have to get a handle on who it belongs to in the first place. We've got to go back to a time when its sound was definitely not for everyone. Yeah, we usually think of music as, entertainment, but this definition tells a totally different story. Historically, gamelan wasn't just played, it was basically a technology of power. It was seen as a direct line between the royal courts on earth and the heavens. And this idea of exclusivity is so important. These gamelan ensembles were literally kept inside the palace walls, the puri. They weren't putting on public concerts. They were used for these really intimate royal ceremonies, complex rituals, and sacred offerings. The music itself was how the monarchy proved it had a divine right to rule. It was, quite literally, the sound of the gods on earth. So, if the music belonged to the gods and the kings, how on earth did it end up in the hands of everyday people? Well, the answer lies in this moment of just unimaginable tragedy and complete transformation. And this timeline just lays it all out so clearly. You can see that sharp dividing line right in the middle, the colonial era. This is where absolutely everything changed. The entire world of gamelan was shattered and then had to be rebuilt into something totally new. So what was that turning point? It was a brutal, shocking event called the Puputan. As Dutch colonial forces were closing in, entire Balinese royal courts, we're talking men, women, and children, dressed in white, marched out of their palaces and walked right into the soldiers' gunfire. They chose ritual suicide over the humiliation of surrender. Before the Puputan, this was the reality. The music was sacred, it was controlled, and it was kept behind palace walls. It represented a stable, divine order that had been in place for centuries. And after that fall, this happened. With the royal patrons dead, the instruments themselves were scattered. They moved from the palaces into the communal villages, the banjar. And out of all that trauma and this newfound freedom, an explosive, flashy, and fiercely competitive new style was born, kibyar. The music was no longer just for the gods. It was now the vibrant democratic voice of the people. So after Indonesian independence, gamelan was lifted up as a national treasure. But its fight? Oh, it was far from over. A whole new battle for its soul was just kicking off. This time against a very different kind of invasion, tourism. And this table just captures that modern conflict perfectly. On one side, you have artists fighting to keep the music's deep cultural meaning alive, to keep innovating. And on the other, there's this immense pressure to create simplified, easy-to-digest tourist gamelan, which risks turning a living, breathing art form into, well, a sterile souvenir. And this is where you see new champions rise up. People like the composer I Dewa Ketut Alit, who's literally building new kinds of gamelan ensembles. When he says his creation gives him creative power, what he's really talking about is artistic freedom. He's resisting all the historical and commercial boxes people have tried to put the music in. He's fighting back with pure innovation. But the fight isn't just about creating new music. It's also about reclaiming the past. And that brings us to one of the most incredible parts of this entire story. The quest to bring a lost voice all the way back home. 1928. For decades, this was just a year, a number. But it turns out it's one of the most important dates in all of Balinese musical history. It marks the moment a piece of the island's soul was captured and then lost. So in 1928, a couple of German record companies came and recorded the sound of gamelan for the very first time. But those recordings, they were taken out of Bali. They ended up becoming these super rare collector's items in the West. For generations, Balinese musicians had no idea this snapshot of their own musical history even existed. And this just shows you the incredible journey to get it back. It started with a loss, then decades of complete silence. Then, in the year 2000, a project began to painstakingly track down, restore, and finally bring these recordings home.
And look, this wasn't just about returning some old audio files. It was about returning a piece of cultural memory, a direct link to the past that is now empowering a whole new generation of performers.
So when you put it all together, the story of gamelan is just this constant struggle and adaptation. It's the story of a sound that simply refuses to be silenced no matter what. I mean, look at this journey. This incredible arc shows how the music is just completely transformed at every single stage. It's been a symbol of divine power, a voice of democratic revolution, a national emblem, and now a beacon for artistic integrity and cultural recovery.
And this is why it matters so much, even if you've never been to Bali. This is a story we see happen all over the world. It's the fight for cultural self-determination. It boils down to a fundamental question. Who has the power to define a culture? Who gets to own its stories, its sounds, and its soul?
And that leaves us with this final thought. Gamelan shows us what can happen when a culture truly reclaims its own voice. It doesn't just go back and repeat the past. It reinvents the future. The fight isn't over, but the music, well, it's playing louder than ever.